Welcome to Market Overtime, right here on Schwab Network. I'm Nicole Petallides. 2025 has felt a buzz of IPO energy. Circle, Figma, CoreWeave, Bullish, Chime are just a few of the names that have gone public this year. But what company is next? Joining me right now, Jannarone, Editor-in-Chief at IPO Edge. Thank you so much for being with us. We've had so many notable names, and I do want to go through them one by one, John. But the big picture here is there was so much anticipation for IPOs, M&A activity. Do you feel it's evident that that's happening now?
Hi, Nicole. Always good to be back on your show. Thank you for having me. Well, I sure do. And as I was just telling you in the green room here, the surprise to me is that it's the middle of August when I normally expect absolutely nothing to be happening, and we've got all kinds of action. I mean, over the last week, the latest excitement's been around Bullish, not the Wall Street term, but a crypto exchange which surged kind of the way that Circle did a couple months ago, not quite as much. And they're even doing innovative things. They're taking the proceeds of that IPO in stable coins, Nicole, not even cash. So we can dig more into that. But that's the latest excitement. There's a lot of speculation about M&A happening too. And I think that there are a lot of factors driving this. On the crypto side, regulation coming out of the White House looks very, very favorable towards that sector. So that's been a big boost there. And I think that, frankly, the concerns about catastrophic tariffs have waned over time. I mean, the tariffs are still high, but not as bad as people thought they were going to be. And the interest rate picture is not quite as shaky as it once was. I think people are expecting us to, in fact, get a cut or two this year.
Indeed. I mean, Bullish here, CEO Tom Farley, who used to be the president of the New York Stock Exchange. So he's certainly a friend on this floor. People are happy to see him. We've had a lot of action here on the floor of the NYSE. Many of these names have, in fact, listed here, and they've been brought into much fanfare to higher highs when they look at the range, and then they price the IPO even higher than the range, and then the market takes it off. I mean, I'm talking about multiple different ones. I mean, we saw 80%. We saw 200%. They've really been received beautifully and have seen incredible run-ups. I mean, what would you say about a name like Circle or Bullish, for example?
Well, look, Nicole, the world is changing, and this stable coin, the interest in stable coin is very serious, and both of those are performing very well. I would say investors ought to look at them with a little bit of caution because they did pop so much, but something else I'll point out, Nicole, is that the success of those two is heralding even more. So Gemini, I believe it's pronounced that way, not Gemini, which was founded by the Winklevoss twins, gosh, I think 11 years ago now, just filed in the last few days. So that one is very likely to come out and probably succeed in tandem with the first two. So I think that the market is going to stay hot, and honestly, like I keep saying, this is August, so come Labor Day, this could be a huge September. So I hope that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I saw that with the Winklevoss twins with Gemini, and that is something that just shows the theme. That crypto is here. The theme is here. The demand is strong. We've interviewed Mike Novogratz, who was just saying that there's this herd mentality. Everybody wants to get on board. And when the demand is there, you just see things rising and everybody jumping on board. Are you worried at some point, because you did have Tom Farley actually noting that institutions now are becoming more amenable and interested in having crypto. I mean, do you see a turn or no time soon? I mean, this is hot and here to stay.
Look, the folks who I talked to in the industry, including a couple of crypto experts actually at our conference at Princeton University a couple months ago, really make the case that there could be a correction, but the trend is still higher, and it's because of all these factors that you talked about. In particular, this demand for the use of stablecoin for transactions, Nicole, is a very, very serious thing. Institutions have backed Bitcoin, for several years, but there are other assets and other blockchains, namely Ethereum, that are also coming into favor now.
Yeah, and Ethereum has broken out as well. I mean, we saw Bitcoin go above 120,000 and, has broken out to new highs. Ethereum has broken out to some recent highs as well. And there are some people who think Ethereum is the better play even now over Bitcoin. Tom Lee, for example, has now jumped on board with Ethereum. He's obviously a notable name, used to be at JP Morgan Fund Strat, now has his own thing going. In the meantime, how about the Ethereum machine? You were looking at that. That was something, the Ether machine, that's back.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, good segue, Nicole, because I did want to talk about that one. So this is a SPAC transaction. It's going public through a blank check company, which we've talked about a lot over the years, though not as much recently. And again, SPACs do have a place. They're not going to be what they were in 2021, but in this instance, it makes a lot of sense. So just to tell you a bit about this company, I think your viewers are pretty familiar with MSTR, which operates in Bitcoin and for years has been building a Bitcoin treasury. These guys are going to do that with Ether. And the reason why this is interesting, Nicole, and forgive me, this is a little bit detailed, is that you can actually earn interest on Ether coins by staking them. And this is to make it simple to understand. It's a way to ensure that the transactions are all sound and approved. And so what that means is that when they go out and buy all these tokens, they're actually going to earn a return on them. And in fact, if they're to apply the same model that some of these Bitcoin treasury companies have, they can also go out and issue debt, probably convertible bonds, at a rate that may even be lower than what they're earning by staking the coins. So that's a really interesting situation there. And also, Nicole, Ethereum is really, really an important blockchain and has advantages over the Bitcoin blockchain. That's all the stablecoin stuff that we're talking about is going to be happening over there. So I think this is a really interesting one for folks to look at, and you can actually. Not that I'm recommending the stock, but you can, because it's a SPAC, if you buy the stock now, which trades under DYNX, it will become the Ether machine when that closes, which I believe is expected to happen in the fall.
Yeah, you have CoreWeave AI, Symphony AI, Databricks. We certainly are seeing a tech theme too, right?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, at the beginning of the year, I wasn't so certain that tech was going to be in favor in the way it is, but look at Figma, which we've talked about. So it's not just crypto. A lot of it's the AI world. Some of the companies that you just alluded to, and I expect that to keep coming as well in force.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, having been on Wall Street pretty much my entire life, the lockup period was a very notable time because the early investors would have the opportunity to sell some portion of their investment, and it was often 6 months later. That has changed some. What is the latest trend that we're seeing for IPO lockup periods, and what do you need to explain to investors and traders here?
You got it. So Nicole, you're right. The lockup has been in place as long as both of us have been around in Wall Street, probably much longer. And traditionally, it's a 180-day period where insiders cannot sell. So of course, the company goes public, and oftentimes you've got a gazillion shares held by insiders who are looking for liquidity, but that wouldn't be very good for the performance of the stock if they're able to sell right off the bat. So normally, you want to keep an eye on that 180-day period. Now, what happens sometimes, and this is interesting, and I want your viewers to understand this, the company doesn't have to do much to break the lockup. You basically have to ask your investment bankers for an okay, and then it happens. So look at Circle. Circle does a secondary offering just 2 months after the IPO at 4 times the IPO price, and the vast majority of those shares sold are secondary shares from insiders. So you've got a flood of stock hitting the market, but I just checked before we jumped on here. Circle is still holding there. It's obviously, all else equal, a negative when you have millions of shares hitting the market, but there's so much demand right now that it's still holding up pretty well. But this is going to be an interesting thing to see, Nicole, and I would say when you see insiders selling that quickly ahead of schedule, you want to be a little careful about being on the buyer side of that. I mean, these are very, very smart people who are taking a big profit, and so you should think twice about, seeking this as an entry point, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Circle, for example. You said after its $1.2 billion IPO, Circle back with a $1.3 billion first-time follow, and all of these things. I mean, we're talking about a lot of money here that happens. And I also think about someone like Warren Buffett, who, sure, he was in on Snowflake, I believe, but for the most part, he was not a fan of IPOs overall. He thought they were volatile. Sometimes, I mean, the time of SPACs, really, there was a time people had a bad taste in their mouth when it came to SPACs because many of them popped and then dropped. I think people are more open to SPACs now, once again, because there's a little more scrutiny maybe. So you have direct listings, you have IPOs, you have SPACs, all of these things that can occur. I also think about the monetary value, the value of these deals versus the number of deals coming to market. Is there any way to quantify thus far how we're doing there? I mean, what kind of money are we seeing coming in? I mean, we were talking about some of that earlier on some of these names.
Yeah, Nicole, for sure. These are, just going back to Figma, for instance, having these companies of that size, tens of billions of dollars. I think Figma was about 20 billion at IPO valuation, and rose above that. These are bigger than we saw last year. Absolutely. I don't have off the top of my head the exact percentage in terms of the quantum, but they're significantly larger. And I think that's what's leading in folks like Gemini, right? I mean, they were waiting for the time when the market will bear some of these larger deals. And the fact that Circle was able to just come to the market and raise, it's funny, Nicole, they raised about the same amount of money with a much smaller number of shares, 2 months later. So the market's appetite is there. It's very strong. And so, yeah, I think that the big deals are a hallmark of 2025 versus really the last couple of years since 21, 22.
Yeah. And I think about some of the other names here. I mean, some names that we just had on our list. We talked about Bullish and Figma, Chime, Circle, MNTN, that's the connective TV tech platform, cloud tech, CoreWeave. You have healthcare software with Hinge. Can you talk about some of those names?
Yeah, well, I think the ones that I wanted to talk about, if I can, Nicole, are some of the ones that are coming up that are the biggest on my radar. And I'd say those would be the likes of Klarna and Stripe. So we all know about Klarna as a buy now, pay later. I think that one could be enormous when it comes, just shifting back to what you're talking about in terms of the size. Same with Stripe. That Stripe has been extremely active, growing like a weed in the payment space. Partnering with all kinds of folks and anywhere transactions are made. And, there are a few themes that run, among those. I mean, the big one is AI, right? So both Klarna and Stripe are finding ways to utilize that, especially Klarna. And when investors see that, it makes it all the more appealing. So, but there are going to be other sectors like the ones you were talking about, like healthcare and so on. But I think the technology is really where the action is. And something that we discussed last time, Nicole, which I think is really important, is that you're seeing a lot of these companies that are backed by Sand Hill Road, Silicon Valley venture capital funds that, in many cases have been sitting on assets they just couldn't move. And so now that the wheels are beginning to turn, you could see a really virtuous cycle. So as some of these larger deals that are backed by VCs get out there into the market, it's going to be easier for them to go and raise new money for new transactions.
Right, and when we talk about Klarna, a Swedish fintech company, I just want to distinguish that from Stripe so people understand each one. And you talk about, coming to market and you think it could be enormous. What would be enormous to you?
I think that those two could be, I'm forgetting the term, mega unicorns. These could be $100 billion valuations. It's possible, yeah.
Right, and then for Stripe, what stands out for Stripe versus some other companies that we already have? This is a company that provides programming interfaces, web developers. They can use that to integrate payment processing into their websites and mobile applications. So another sort of payment type of space. What do you like about Stripe?
I like it a lot because, for one thing, it's breadth of potential customers. So with Stripe, as you just alluded to, Nicole, you can have a very young new company getting your first few dollars of revenue and immediately set something up with their help that works for you. On the other hand, it could also be an enterprise size client or customer, much larger. And What I'm seeing with Stripe is they just continue to gain ground across different sectors, be it hospitality, restaurants, broader retail, et cetera. And I think when you look at a company in a world like payments, trust is really important. So if I'm looking for a partner who's going to handle transactions for my company, I'm going to want to go with a name that I know really well. And Stripe has, over the last several years built an incredibly strong brand. Just like when you go to a coffee shop, at this point, a lot of us are beginning to recognize a name like Toast. Toast has been public for a few years, but it's a similar idea. And, these owners want to go with something
Right.
that's known and trusted.
Look, when ARM came out, that was super exciting. We started to get an appetite for technology, what was going to fly, what wasn't. When you think about previous mega unicorns, as you're using that phrase, maybe billions of dollars in IPO valuation, which ones stand out to you over the last few years?
Well, let me see. If we go, you put me in the spot here, Nicole. If we go way back, I would think about something like Alibaba, that kind of scale. Like a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity that's going to be like that. But I will caution you, Nicole, when that happens, the odds of most any investor getting any allocation are slim to none. These deals are going to have bankers looking for their best, biggest investors, in particular long only investors. That meaning not hedge funds. Those that they think are going to hold shares for a long period of time. I think last time, Nicole, we may have spoken about Figma deliberately doing that, saying, I don't want hedge funds. I only want long only guys who are going to hold this for years. And if you're retail, you know,
Right. I mean, Alibaba was the largest e-commerce company, from China, and it went public and actually eclipsed Meta as a largest U.S. IPO. So you're saying that Klarna and Stripe could be in this kind of category, as big as
yeah,
that.
maybe
When
not
you think,
quite as big. Yeah, but
but
in the
big,
same neighborhood. Yeah,
right?
and also if we momentum will build on itself. If those two go well, what I hear from the investment bankers I speak to and speak at our events, they've been expecting 2026 to be big. Although I got to say, Nicole, based on what you and I've been talking about in our last couple of visits here, some of these could be pulled into 2025 because the window never stays open forever, and when the window is there for deals of this size and scale, they can't sit on their hands and wait just because they thought they might do first quarter next year. So don't be shocked if some of the 2026 action actually gets pulled into this year.
And also, I think about when you talk about what's coming and the momentum that is here in 2025 and could go into 2026. I heard someone from JP Morgan talking about the lineup of IPOs, more than half were AI related. She said, I interviewed one of the leading folks here on the team that closes for IPOs here at the New York Stock Exchange. He also said he saw a lot of tech coming. So, and there's a lot of money on the sidelines. You have private equity. They want to put money to work. And do you feel that backing is there? Do you feel that folks are pushing these IPOs now because they want to get that money to work?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are a lot of private equity funds, Nicole, that you might be aware of that have had to, just basically tell investors, we're going to have to hold on to this into the next fund even, and that's not the way it's supposed to work. The old model is you spend 5 years making investments, 5 years harvesting, and with the market freezing up to a degree, particularly after the SPAC bubble, the entire IPO market was damaged by that, and so yes, there are a lot of very eager sellers looking for liquidity. But what's great is that valuations have come up to a point now, and this was the story with Figma, where even the most recent private investors are making a profit. See, the trouble is, if you'd gone public in 2023, 2024, you would have had some investors who are effectively going to have to take a loss. It would be, what they call a down round, as in raising money at a lower valuation than the prior one. So now that element is fading away to a degree, it's all the more reason to be enthusiastic.
And we don't necessarily need to see profitability anymore either. I mean, look, Uber came public and that had a path to profitability, but it took a long time. The Fed, you mentioned rates. the Fed, when the Fed cuts rates, that's always beneficial to these kinds of tech companies because they're always borrowing money. I would think that you have something to say about that. And when I mentioned what happened with SPACs, after COVID in particular, people were left with a bad taste in their mouth. Do you expect to see more IPOs with the proper, road shows and things like that, or more SPACs and direct listings and things like that? So let's talk about the rate environment and what you see as more likely to be happening on how these things come public.
Yeah, so I think that as long as the market continues to see a relatively dovish Fed, which it does right now, that's going to be supportive. On the profitability side, I think you got to bifurcate it a little bit. So Figma, for instance, very profitable. I don't believe it has any debt, so that was fantastic, and that helped it command an incredibly high valuation. Some of these other crypto companies we're talking about, so Gemini, for instance, is losing money, but it doesn't really matter right now because of the enthusiasm around this structural shift towards a broader embracement of coins, particularly stable coins, is going to let those guys get away with it for a little while. Now, obviously, you can't do it forever, and you're right. If you're in a more traditional business that it's not in the middle of a revolution in the way that the crypto is, you're still going to have to, I think, make the case that you're going to be profitable soon. We both remember the days when there were companies coming out saying we have no clue when we're going to be profitable, and that's not going to work. I don't think that's except in rare instances, as I just alluded to with some of these crypto stories, and perhaps AI.
Yeah. Look, the Winklevoss Gemini is supposed to go public after Labor Day, so we can watch for that in the second half of the year. That'll be something that we can grab the attention. JP Morgan and others had put together that this year the number of companies that were going public, raising more than $15 billion in total, and it excludes SPACs, but last year, raising more than $15 billion to approach $40 billion in total. Last year was $27.5 billion raised on U.S. exchanges. So it really shows you this momentum year over year. Part of that was that a lot of folks thought the administration would be more amenable and friendly to businesses to do that. I think the AI crypto theme is something you're focusing on here, and the IPO lockups. I wanted to wrap up with just some of these final thoughts here about your passion for what's going on. You've had a long time. You mentioned, decades of what goes on with lockups. So I know you've been here a long time, and AI and crypto were not the story. Tell me about the passion that you have for IPOs now versus years past. I mean, we had the tech boom and bust. There was a time tech was super hot. And what is it about now that really is exciting versus your past experiences?
Well, I guess going way back, Nicole, I hadn't thought of this, but I remember covering Wall Street in venture capital in particular in the decade after the dot-com bust, and it was just a graveyard. It was, even the most famous venture capital funds were sitting on these duds that were never going to be worth much because the market went up too much. What I'm hoping we're going to see here, at least for a little while, is a little bit of a golden age for these folks who have a lot of companies in their portfolio that are very successful, and they're going to actually be able to bring them to market. And I didn't answer your question before quite right. It's not really going to be through SPACs and direct listings very often. That makes sense for some specific reasons for the Ether machine, but most of these are going to be regular way IPOs where you have a team of investment bankers taking the company around the country to meet investors. And by the way, retail investors can almost always watch that roadshow at just Google Retail Roadshow. I encourage you guys out there to do your homework. So that's what I'm hoping to see. So I want to see more, not just more AI and crypto stories, but I want to see more Figmas. I want to see more of that. I want to see more, companies backed by Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia coming out and going public and trading well. I mean, that's going to be the healthiest thing that this market can see.
Yeah, and you noted like the secondary, for example, for something like Circle, right? If you miss the IPO or you're nervous about volatility at that time, sometimes you'll see a secondary offering, right?
Yeah, and well, on the secondaries, I would keep a close watch on this. And in fact, next time I'm on, Nicole, I'll pull some numbers together for us. I noticed this happening in 2018. You started to see the time of the first secondary offering getting shorter and shorter reflecting institutional investors and insiders, founders, et cetera, trying to get out. So if you want to be, if you want to stay sober about all this, I would keep an eye on something like that. When you see a whole lot of sellers in a hurry to get out after something performs really well, you want to watch those stocks with caution.
And a lot of enthusiasm just around stablecoins, as you mentioned, which is expected to continue. I mean, we saw how Circle and Bullish, for example, were received. We have more to come. It sounds like, John, you are excited about the next 6 to 12 months with this lineup. You also mentioned Klarna and Stripe that we have to watch. So it's a great conversation, and we look forward to having you back very soon in a very busy time here on Wall Street. John Jannarone, Editor-in-Chief at IPO Edge. Thank you. That's going to do it for us here on Market Overtime. And be sure to like and subscribe to the Schwab Network YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram as well. I'm Nicole Petallides. Thanks for joining us.